Hello and welcome to the Masters Swimming Podcast, available on all the major podcast platforms and on YouTube. I'm Joe Malone, and joining me this week is retired triple Olympian and Olympic silver medalist in the 10K open water swim, Keri-anne Payne. So thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
So it feels really weird to introduce you and say the word retired, given that you're 35. But of course, you're not retired from work generally, and you've since founded two really great companies. We'll get onto those later on, but I wanted to start just by asking you kind of how the open water thing came about, or what that was born out of, because I would imagine that you, as a kid, started swimming in the pool, maybe for a club, and somewhere down the line you went into open water and maybe fell in love with it. Is that kind of how it worked?
Pretty much, yeah. It definitely found me, I'd say. But I think I had all the hallmarks of it through my childhood growing up. So I was actually born in South Africa and lived there until I was 13. And almost every second or third weekend in South Africa every weekend was basically a swimming competition. But then every second or third weekend was a open water competition. So I basically got a lot of an open water competition being like a mile is pretty much what they constantly were. There was nothing ever longer than that. And I'm not even sure I remember us even calling it open water. It was just swimming. It was like
sea swimming, yeah.
It was a race. Well, it wasn't sea, thankfully. South Africa's
good.
It was more dam swimming. I'd call it dam swimming. So it was like finding a dam somewhere.
Right.
And we would do all these swims to qualify and get prepared for this one major one at the end of the year or at the end of the season, which was in February time, called the Mid-Mar Mile. And I did that swim loads and loads throughout the whole of my life, and I absolutely loved it. And anyway, so that was very much like proper open water swimming, racing, competing, starting with a load of people going in. So I think my childhood was a lot of that throughout it, although I never classed myself as an open water swimmer, even though I won that race quite a few times as a junior kid and all that kind of stuff as well. So that's been interesting, that whole process going from there. Sorry, I have a dog, and he has now decided that now is the time that he is going to chew everything.
No, it's cool. Listen, we all love dogs. So you're doing these open water swims. Is that part of the club that you were swimming for? Presumably in the water in a swimming pool, but you would find yourself in open water as well.
Yeah, I mean, everyone did it. The whole squad didn't have a choice, whether you were a breaststroker, freestyler, backstroker, 50 sprinter. I mean, you'd moan about it, but we all did it because everyone did them anyway. It was just a normal thing. It was either this or it was that.
And were you always a freestyler?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, I did 100 fly. I used to think that was my event.
Yeah.
Until I got older and realized that wasn't my event. So I used to think, yeah, I'm a sprinter, I'm a 100 fly swimmer. And I did it pretty decent. So 100 fly, I think it was 13. And I think my best time was like a 63 or something like that.
Oh, wow.
Blimey. Yeah, it was a pretty decent time.
That's a very good time. Yeah.
But I was very much more a distance swimmer, really, in the grand scheme of things. So I would do the 100 fly, but I would also do the 400 freestyle.
Yeah.
As we went through that way. So, so that's kind of where so we were always part of a club. Everyone did it anyway, whether you liked it or not. And then, I mean, obviously they weren't forcing us to do it, but everyone just did it because that's what happened. And it was always a fun day as well. It wasn't just and that's the thing I love about open water swimming, is that there's just one event. You can go and do one event, and you go in the morning, you do your event, and then you have fun for the rest of the day, essentially. So I didn't really think much more of that at all. Actually, I did think I was a pool swimmer, so racing the 2 400 and 800, and then really the 400 and 800 freestyle. Moved to the UK 2001, joined a club in North Manchester called Aquabears of Rochdale, and absolutely loved it. Dave Crouch, my coach there, was fantastic, and he really was the one that helped me understand that I was a distance swimmer. You're a distance swimmer, Keri-anne, through and through. I was like, fine, okay. And open water wasn't mentioned then at all, because it just wasn't, again, it wasn't really massively a thing. It hadn't been in the Olympics or anything like that. We weren't really thinking about Olympics, but this was pre-Athens anyway. This wasn't pre-Beijing. And then it got to a couple of years down the line, and I was training in a 33 and a third meter pool in the morning and a 25-yard pool in the evening. So, I mean, it was a challenge. So every Wednesday morning we used to go to the aquatic centre in Manchester, and I'd train long course on a Wednesday morning, and maybe a Saturday morning if we could get it to work. But it just seemed like a lot of faff here and there and all that kind of stuff, and lots of compromises. So between the two of us, we decided that actually it was probably best for me to move on to a club that had access to a 50 meter pool, so I could do a bit more long course training, or even if it wasn't long course, the short course was like a normal short course length. It also feels really good to actually say these words out and know that people understand. There are so many people that don't understand, like, what's short course? What do you mean? So that's great. I'm actually loving going back into the swimming lingo. It's good. I might flex as many of my swimming lingo words as I've got now. So then I joined Stockport Metro, so with under Sean Kelly, and I joined at the time just before Athens. So there's Steve Parry was there, Adi Turner, Graham Smith, James Goddard, all those guys were there part of training, and it was honestly the best year of training I ever did. I learned so much from them. We had so much fun. They were basically a bunch of boys. And I don't think they'd be upset to hear me say that. We were a bunch of boys. So it was just really fun, and training was good. The coaching was amazing because everyone was just loving what they were doing and working really hard. At the same time, it was this culture of like, everyone knew what they were doing, why they were doing it, and how they were going to get there. There wasn't this like, oh, I can't be bothered doing this. So it was just, eye-opening. And I was training with Graham Smith, who was a 1500 freestyler. And I've never felt so inadequate in my whole life, I'm not going to lie, in this moment, because he would be lapping me on 300s. And I'd be like, how are you lapping me to 300? I'm not slow. But he was just amazing at the stuff that he did. He just constantly lapped me. So I kind of definitely learned where I was in the pecking order there. But I was I was 15 at the time. Anyway, loved it. It was such an amazing year, and I missed out on Athens. I didn't do the qualifying time at the trials, but then I did the time 2 weeks later.
That's a shame.
It was bittersweet, but I'm really, really glad I didn't go. Ooh, sorry. I'm really, really glad I didn't go, because for me, it was... I think I was too young. I would have gone straight in my first competition.
So you were 15 at this point, did you say? Yeah.
I would have gone in to my first major competition, to an Olympic Games. I wouldn't have gone through any junior, like hardly anything junior based, and it would have been straight in at the Olympic Games, which I think is probably like amazing if you have the opportunity to do that. I mean, if I qualified, of course I would have gone.
Yeah.
But in hindsight, I'm glad I didn't, because actually I think I needed that kind of stepping stone. Certainly going from a junior into a senior, I think you need that stepping stone of competition to kind of help you through the ranks, hone your racing skills, all that kind of stuff. Anyway, then kind of fast forward 2 years to Commonwealth Games, made the Commonwealth Games. So that was 2004. 2005 was World Champs trials. And obviously after an Olympics, the qualifying times are always really hard, because on Olympic Games and world records are broken, all that kind of stuff. So then I did an 8-second PB or something absolutely ridiculous. But I missed out on the World Champs by 0.4 of a second, because the time was just so hard from the Olympics. It was like top 8 in the world or something like that. And it was ridiculous. So that was a little bit of a blow for me as well, because I was hoping that would be the next major competition I made. Anyway, didn't really happen. I think after that I went on to do, things like European juniors and all the normal things that you're supposed to do as a junior on your way up. Again, so 2006 Commonwealth Games, made the team. I loved the experience, like going out, and the experience was amazing, and I learned a lot. Again, got some amazing memories from being on a team, my first major competition. But for the first time in my whole life doing anything competing, and this is like swimming school galas, which I knew I would win, anything like that makes me, anything that's like a performance, I get really nervous for. I'm not too nervous that I don't enjoy it or any of that kind of stuff, but nervous for me are like a really important part of the process. And this was the first competition I wasn't nervous for. So I was in the call room, there's like 17,000 people in the stands, I could hear them, and I wasn't nervous. And I was like, this is weird, why am I not? I still today can't tell you why. Literally have no idea why I wasn't nervous, but I just wasn't. And I didn't perform particularly well. I was nowhere near my best. And I came fourth again, which was like, it was the first time I came fourth. There's lots of fours in my life, and we'll come to that at some point. We will. But so I came fourth on that one, and I missed a medal. If I'd gone close to my best, I might have, challenged for a medal. Certainly, I think if I'd gone close to my best, I could have challenged for certainly a silver medal. So it wasn't good. And I think what had happened actually was we'd had a new performance director, or someone had come in just before that, and I think did the classic mistake of like tinkering with things like a week before. and my coach was like, just ignore it, ignore it, ignore it, ignore it. And I don't think I could. I don't think I processed it yet.
Can you give us an example of some of the things that you were sort of tinkering with?
So I think we were tinkering with, so at the time I raced without goggles, and that was just because as a kid, I lost them all the time.
Wow. Yeah.
And I think my coach, the coach at the time, the guy was like, I really think you should wear goggles so you can see everyone else. And I was like, I get it. I do get it. But I haven't raced in them for years, and I just feel way more comfortable. And he's like, yeah, but aerodynamically, you're better with goggles on. And I was like, I appreciate that. Anyway, I maybe felt a little bit kind of not bullied into it by any means. There was no bullying. Probably shouldn't even mention that word, but it was like I understood the logic behind it. I totally got it. And and I was a youngster, so they were like, "Mom, maybe you should think about it." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And there was a little bit around technique, so a tiny bit around sort of. I think it was around stroke rate actually, or something along those lines. I can't quite remember now exactly what it was, but it was little subtle things that they'd kind of suggested, and it just kind of threw me, I think. Of moment. And I remember going, I think I had a pair of goggles with me, and I think I decided last minute, like, I can't wear them, I'm not gonna wear them, this is weird, I'm not gonna wear them. So I decided not to wear them, and I raced without them. And that's not the reason I came fourth, because it mattered. But it was just, I think my head wasn't quite with it at the time. But anyway, coming back from that, so missed out on the Athens Olympics, missed out on the World Championships, missed out on a medal, and I was one of 2 people that didn't win a medal on the England team. And
that's such a shame.
Myself and Mark Foster were the 2 that didn't win medals. So that was, and they're like, at the end, they're like, everyone that's won a medal, stay behind, we'll have a big team photo.
Oh God.
Me and Mark were like, see ya.
Yeah.
Turned around and walked off, which was a bit much. But anyway, it is what it was. Anyway, after that, that's when open water started to make an appearance. So the year before, or was it 2006? I think it was the beginning of 2006, Cassie Patton joined Stockport Metro from Plymouth. And she was doing open water swimming. She was racing the 10Ks, 800 freestyles as well, and 10Ks. And I had a couple of pretty dark weeks after the Commonwealth Games. I wasn't really sure. I didn't really know much more. I think I was about 17, 18 at the time. And I was just a bit like, I don't really enjoy this. I'm not really sure. I'm probably not going to make it to another Olympics or 2 an Olympics. So what's the point? I'm not enjoying it. I didn't enjoy racing, training. I mean, racing for me was the measure of how well training was going. So I'm the kind of swimmer that lived to train.
Okay.
Rather than lived to race. Racing wasn't really, like, it was like an inevitable thing I had to do to prove how well my training was going. For me, that was really important for me, was the training side of it, and I wasn't enjoying that, and that was really strange. So I took a couple of weeks off, and I'm sure I cried a lot. My coach was like, I don't really know what to do with this.
Yeah, it's tough.
Going on here. So he was like, right, we've got to make a decision. Let's change it up. So let's forget about 800s. And because I think in his mind, he was like, let's forget about it for now. Take a couple of years. We've got a year, 2007. We're just not going to do any 800s. Take all the pressure away and see how it kind of goes. And he's like, there's 2 options. You can go to Sheffield and you can race the 200 and 400 medley in Sheffield at this next competition that's coming up. Or you can go to Australia. And I honestly didn't even hear the rest of it. I didn't hear that. Like, that one, B. We'll go B, option B, which was to go out to Australia and race a 10K to try and make the World Championships team. And I was like, yeah, fine, fair enough. And it didn't dawn on me until I got there that I was like, oh, 10K is a really long way. And
it's a little bit further than 800 meters.
Yeah, like 8.5 minutes to 2 hours, basically.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, what's the worst that can happen? Essentially, I do it, I hate it, we can go back, it's fine. And I think that like open water experience really helped me out with that, because I'd been in the water before, not in the sea. I hadn't raced in the sea like that before. And this was in Melbourne. And it was quite an interesting competition, but I did it, and it went well. I enjoyed it. It was a local competition. So it was an Australian trials, I think, potentially. So there wasn't that many really, really good swimmers. I mean, there was really good swimmers there, but it wasn't like a World Championships or anything like that. So there was, maybe like 20 of us racing, swimming around, all that kind of stuff. So it was definitely an interesting competition. But I didn't love it. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, I was gonna say, talk to us about how you wrap your head around something like that. You go from, an 800 all of a sudden to a race that is around 2 hours. I mean, that is one hell of a mindset that you've got to suddenly have, within your armor. So what did you do in the preparation for that to get yourself ready?
Not much really. It was just a case of like go out and see how you get on. I think my coach, you know, because he didn't know much either really about it. This was the first time that he'd been out to see a 10K as well. So he was just like, well, don't take it too hard and see how stick with a pack, see how that goes. And I was like, what's a pack? Like it was that, you know, but I did kind of get an idea from my open water days in South Africa of that, but they were like races. It was like a mile, so it was like a sprint from start to finish. And usually those competitions out in South Africa had like spot prizes, so if you were the first to 400 you'd win some money. So nice. It was genuinely quite like a fast paced thing. So this was a different kettle of fish really. So I can't really remember a huge amount about the tactics of that swim, but I know I came out third or fourth, maybe something like that. So it was a decent show. I'm not sure I would have enjoyed. I'm not sure I'd have done another 10K. This is gonna sound really bad. If my 10K experience had been in England, I think. Like coldest. This was Australia. It was really warm. It was sunny, and I was like, and it was on a beach. We were on a beach in Melbourne. Like it couldn't really get much cooler, if you like, from a pool like Sheffield. Sorry to Sheffield fans, like Sheffield poolside, or this beach in Australia.
Yeah.
So, I think it was that experience that opened up my eyes to actually what this event could be. So I looked past the fact that I had to like now somehow swim for 2 hours instead of swimming for 8.5 minutes. But swimming in the sea for that long, really like the inside of your mouth gets, and your tongue, like the sides of your tongue get really swollen from the salt. And so there was lots of things at the end that was like, oh, and this goggle marks were like epic.
So you did wear goggles for that one, did you?
Yeah, I did. Of course, I wore goggles for that. Yeah, this is where my goggle career started. There's no way I could have swum 2 hours in the places I've swum around the world without goggles on. That's for sure. But yeah, like epic goggle marks, cap marks, all this kind of stuff. But it kind of. So I think what my coach had secretly done was he knew that it was going to be in the Olympics for 2008. It was the inaugural event for the 10K. So he kind of like, pushed me towards that realm, if that makes sense, without me necessarily realizing it in that moment. So he kind of just thought, well, let's see how it goes. And he didn't push me, which I thought was really good as well. I think because I was in a bit of a delicate place anyway, he didn't really push me to do it that much. So that was really good. It was really good to kind of have almost like whatever, let's just see how it goes, just whatever, see how we get on. And I didn't feel any pressure. So I think how I think he was hoping it was going to go went how he was hoping it was going to go, if that makes sense. Because I could have gone out and gone, no, absolutely not, never doing that again.
Yeah.
And I did a little bit. I was like, that was a really long way. I didn't really enjoy that. And there was girls swimming next to me and I didn't enjoy that either. But everything else around it was really good, if that makes sense.
Yeah, of course.
The opportunity. And then from there, we raced a few other competitions, went to one in Seville, and I'd gone from pools around the world, so where you only see the same sort of thing, to like these amazing open water venues and beaches and all this kind of stuff. And I think I learned to love that first. I learned to love the environment around it before I really learned to love the 10K racing and swimming with people. I'm not sure if I really, really got to love that part of it ever, to be honest, unless I was doing what ended up being my tactic, which was basically to lead out from the front, from the start and start leading and basically, so I didn't have to deal with anybody else behind me. It was like basically swimming in a swimming pool, but just a really big one.
That's really cool. And actually the timing of open water, as I say, coming into the Olympics was perfect for you. And it sounds like you had a really good experience. And quite interesting that you say that you never really fell in love with the 10K race, but it was actually kind of everything else around it. And that kind of talks to what you've gone on to do in your career now, I suppose, which we will get onto. But I want to talk about the Beijing Olympics, because I believe you swam the 200 and the 400 IM. Am I correct?
I did, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so did you also do the 10K as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, you did. So they're three very different events. In terms of how you physically prepare, mentally prepare. So did you have some kind of like training tactic to separate those two things, or were you focusing on the IMs or the 10K, and then the other one just kind of you just did it?
Yeah, so I think because we changed focus from the 800, and I didn't race an 800 for probably a good 2 or 3 years, but I still it was still important for us to race in the pool, just to kind of hone those racing skills and to get myself fired up, and because there wasn't that many 10Ks at the time, so it wasn't like I could race as much as you'd race in the pool. So my coach basically said, we still need to race in the pool. What is it that you want to do? So I just said, well, let's just do the 200. I think I still went to Sheffield in the end and raced the 200, 400 in the water. Sorry, Buddy wants to say hello. Buddy, go on. There you go. So the racing in the pool, the 200 and the 400 medley was kind of just like an opportunity to also train slightly differently. I think training for 400 medley is a lot like training for distance events anyway. It's pretty hardcore. So my coach was happy that I was doing medley sets instead of, necessarily long distance freestyle sets, because I was still putting in a lot of effort and energy and time to get really good at those things anyway. And I think because we'd taken the pressure completely off, and there's a photo of me, one of my favorite photos ever, which is after the 200 medley. That was the first race I qualified for the Beijing Olympics, was the 200 medley. And there's just a picture of me and Hannah Miley. So Hannah Miley doing an interview, like smiling, and me going, and I was speaking to Steve Parry, because he was doing the interviewing at the time. He was basically like my big brother. I trained with him the 4 years previous. And he was just like, they all used to call me Kez, and he was like, Kez, what? And I was like, I have no idea. It's one of my favorite photos, because I didn't expect, the time again was really hard. It was a 2:12, the qualifying time. I never thought I'd get there. It's a 200 medley, and I did it. I qualified and made the team for that. And then I made the team for the 400 medley and the team for the 10K as well. So it was amazing, having changed focus and really kind of that change in focus, I think really was great for me. So when it came to training, I was also the kind of someone that put a lot of my faith in my coach, and I was, he'd say, what do you think of your taper? And I'd be like, looks great. And I think I wish I could go back. And I think the thing with swimming is it's quite a young sport when you start in that kind of area, that when you're 15 and a coach is asking you what you think of the sessions you're doing, you're like, I don't know. You're the coach, tell me what to do. But at some point you turn into that adult and you really probably should know more about it. And I don't think I ever did learn any more about it until it was almost too late. We'll talk about that later. But so I didn't really know what was going on, to be honest. I was just like, I had full faith in him and trust in him, which is obviously super important to have that. I knew that he'd get me ready the best that he could. I think he decided that my best chance was the 10K. So my taper was very much based around the 10K. And yes, 10K swimmers still do a taper. It's not very long, but it's still a taper. I think they do that just for our mental well-being, I think. Yeah, there's a taper. Yeah, taper's coming.
I think it's probably a good tactic.
Your taper's coming. Be like, is it coming? Anyway, so I wasn't that happy with my performance in the pool for the 200 and the 400. I came 15th, I think, for the 15 in one and 16 in the other, which is still, decent at the Olympic Games coming. I think I made the semi-final for the 200. So I think it must have been 16th in that. I think I came last in that, but still 16th, and then 15th in the 400 medley. So not the performances I didn't know what to expect, but they weren't my best times in there. So, but I was kind of like a week and a half out for what my taper was ultimately aimed for. So swimming in the pool was just a case of following the process. I knew the process, I knew what I was doing, knew the races I was doing, and it was just about giving it a go. It's like a dry run essentially for the 10K. And I think knowing that I had another event to go almost also made it better in a way, because it was the 10K still. So it wasn't like this, it was terrible. And then, because sometimes you can see when someone has a terrible race at a major meet and they have a couple more, they tend to go downhill unless they can jump themselves out of it. So that was that.
Yeah, and I guess having that completely different event, as you were just sort of talking about a few minutes ago, was probably quite helpful, because if you could get stuck in a rut on like a 200 and a 400 IM, the two very similar events, but then actually having something that's totally different was probably quite a healthy thing, really. So I want to fast forward to you won the World Championships in 2011 in the 10K. That made you the first British athlete in any sport to qualify for the Home Olympics in 2012, which was that must have been really cool, by the way.
It really was a very spectacular day because not only did I qualify and was the first person to qualify, my niece was born on exactly the same day.
Oh, wow.
It was great for the family, terrifying for my mum. My poor mum had one daughter in labor who she didn't tell her that she was in labor until after I finished racing, but she was still in labor. Mum was still like worrying about it. And then the other daughter across the other side of the world racing to make it to a home Olympic Games. So yeah, it was it was quite an epic day for my mum, poor thing. She says that's why she's great. I'm sure that she was great. But she says that's why she's great. But yeah, it was really amazing. Like that race for me was probably my best ever performance ever. Of any race I've ever done, that one was probably my best performance ever because everything, I nailed everything. The start, the swim, I had extra energy, not extra energy, but I always felt like if anybody came anywhere near me, I had another gear to go. And I didn't feel at any point like I was out of control. It really was if I was to, separate out the performances, they all mean certain different things, but that one, the World Champs in Shanghai, that was like my absolute best ever performance was on that race.
That's really interesting because I've heard many, kind of retired swimmers who have said that very rarely do you get that feeling in a race, whether you're a 50-meter swimmer or 10K swimmer. You very rarely get that feeling where it all just feels amazing and it almost feels effortless. Yeah, I mean, obviously it's hard work, but that, almost that easy speed thing, it just feels really natural and really good. And how many times would you say you had that in your career?
Hardly ever. Honestly, hardly ever. I think maybe that 200 medley was probably one of those things. And then, and that swim was just, it was amazing. I mean, I had another really, really good one in Rome, which was the first time I became world champion. So that was 2009 after the Beijing Olympics. That was another great performance from a tactical perspective and a racing perspective. But I think Shanghai was a bit more because it was I was the returning world champion. So I kind of there was a bit more pressure, all this kind of stuff, the pressure of making the Olympic Games as well. So there was lots of other intricate bits within that. It was really warm. So the water was like close to 30 degrees. And when I talk to other swimmers from that competition, all of them say, "Oh, it was so hot."
Really?
It was really, really warm. I don't remember that at all. I do not associate that swim with being warm at all, but I think I'm definitely a warm weather kind of swimmer anyway. So yeah, it was just not many times.
No, it sounds like you found your flow in that race, which is amazing. And let's talk about the 2012 Olympics then. Yeah, the 10K race was quite something. You finished fourth. You kind of mentioned that earlier. You were 4 seconds behind gold.
Yeah, I was 4 seconds behind gold, and I was 0.4 of a second behind.
Yeah, that's I don't want to bring up kind of probably negative kind of memories, but did you? You talk about the flow, for example, a year earlier. Did you feel in control during that race, even towards the finish line? Did you feel good, or did it all feel really
No,
hard?
it didn't fall apart, but it wasn't the ideal lead up to that competition for me. I mean, my coach got really sick and he had to take time away. And this was the point I was trying to make earlier. So this was April, so Olympic trials in the pool. The day before we went away, he couldn't actually join us and he was really ill, so he couldn't join us for the rest of the season.
Okay.
And that was the first time in 9 years I didn't have this coach on poolside with me, kind of talking me through my pre-race routines. And I mean, I would do it, and I'm a very routine-based person, so I didn't need him to say, now it's time to do this. And he wasn't holding my hand through it. But when you have the same person there for 9 years and the routines you have of it didn't matter what he said before I got in. He could have said anything. We could have talked about the weather, the costume I was wearing, or the goggles, or the hat. Whatever. We could have talked about honestly anything just before. But the routine was to talk just before we went down. And all of a sudden, I didn't have this. Thankfully, it was just not in like that. But thankfully, it was just Olympic trials rather than the Olympics or a major competition. And I wasn't sure how trials were going to go anyway, because I'd had a really bad back injury and I got a kidney infection just after that as well. So I think my body was a little bit my body was struggling. We'd gone up to altitude and I had a really bad injury, and I think I got a bit of altitude sickness as well, because I lost a load of weight, more weight than I've been the same weight my whole life. I say a load of weight, for me it was like 2 kilograms, which is probably not a lot for a lot of people, but for me, I've literally been the same weight since I was about 14. The same size, height, weight, everything through the whole of my career, just the same. Nothing really ever changed. Maybe like half a kilogram here, half a kilogram there.
Water weight probably.
Yeah, or something like that. Yeah, maybe after like our 2 weeks off at Christmas, at like, you know, the start of the season again. But even then, like, and even now, still now, I've been retired for 5 years and I'm
Mm.
probably still exactly the same weight.
Yeah.
It's definitely less muscle, probably more fat, but I'm still like, my body's like, I like this weight. We'll just figure it out how I get it. So still very much the same weight. So that had always been like that. But you know, I lost like 2-3 kilograms, which is, you know, everyone was like, wow, you look great. Like you look really good. Like you look really slim. But I don't think my body actually really liked that. So I think I was under a lot of pressure, like internally a lot of pressure. So I was yeah, struggling with a back injury, and then I got a kidney infection, which I've never had before, ever. After trials, my coach had, you know, he was ill, and obviously we were worried about him, making sure he was okay, doing the right thing for himself. So it was a lot happening. So, but I remember after my kidney infection, our assistant coach, a guy called Lars Humer, he's totally stepped up and was amazing. And he was like, look, you've got two options. One is you can pretend to carry on being like a victim in this sort of scenario, or you can, we've got tons of time. There's tons of time between now and the Olympics. We've got loads of time to get you back in the game. You've only had a kid, you've only been off for a week and a half. It's fine. We'll work you in slowly. We're not going to push you too far. Your back's better, but we're still going to continue to see the physio. We had this great plan. And I really, again, I felt really, really calm with that. But his style of coaching was very much what I call now like a proper coaching style, which was, and he would ask me, like, what sessions do you want to do? I'd be like, I don't know. Keri, you're 20, how old was I after that? 2012. You're 25 years old. You need to know what sessions you're doing. And I was like, but I've never, like, no, really, what? So it was a really, like, it was a proper, you know, indoctrination into that kind of the difference of that. And we worked really well together. I did some great sessions, like really kind of focusing on open water racing and how I could, you know, what things I could do in training to really help me with that, and different sets and changing things around a little bit, which was really, really interesting. I really enjoyed it. The change in things and being a bit more in control of what I was doing. So I felt ready. I didn't not feel ready. I also had loads of sponsors before the Olympics, which I again talked to both coaches about, and I was like, look, we've agreed before we've even signed anything with these people that they are joining my journey. Like, it's not about, you know, a lot of them would have like medal clauses and all that kind of stuff in. And I was like, I'm not interested in a medal clause, take it out. I'm not interested in it. If you're here because you think I'm going to win a medal or you want me to win a medal, I'm not interested in that you're joining my journey and I'm going to share that process with you.
That's great.
And so whatever kind of happens. And they were all really good with that.
Yeah.
I'm really happy with it. And that made me feel better. I felt like there was no pressure from them. There was no pressure from anything else, my family. There's no pressure from any of that kind of stuff. I really felt like I'd taken all the pressure off. It was just about getting my head stuck in the game and training and racing. Anyway, dived in, started the swim. I didn't feel amazing. I didn't feel on top form. I certainly didn't feel like I did the year before in terms of on the day. It just, you know, I probably could have had probably needed like another week or so. I mean, everyone can say that. I just needed one more week. But I probably did need about another week or another month of training or something along those lines. Anyway, it still was fine. And I did my normal tactic leading out in front. But on this occasion, the Hungarian swimmer decided to do the same. And to be honest, I'm surprised it took them 4 years to kind of foil my tactic, not foil it, but like copy me, because it worked really well for me from Beijing to London. But the suit I had didn't have any where I could put a gel. So I had to go into the feeding station. So for a 10K, it's 2 hours. Generally, you go in 2 or 3 times to a feeding station to take like a carbohydrate gel of some sort, or a sugary drink or something to kind of boost you as you go around. And it was 6 loops of the serpentine. And I normally would have gone in probably the 2nd, probably the 4th, and maybe the 5th, depending on where it was situated. But it was because I wanted to be on the racing line, so I was on the inside of the course and she was on the outside. And the feeding station was on the outside. And every time we went near the feeding station, she wouldn't let me past. And I kind of thought, well, I'll stick here. It's fine. I have another one. I have another lap. Anyway, got to the 4th lap and I was like, I really do need to go into the feeding station. Like, I've potentially missed one, and that's fine to miss one because we didn't necessarily need it, but it was going to be really helpful. And I was thinking towards the end, I'm going to need to make sure I've got the fuel in my system to carry on towards the end. So I was like, I need to go in on this one. Anyway, I went into the feeding station and Just made a rookie error. It was a bit of a rookie error on everyone's part, to be honest. So my part, the person that had the feeding pole part, it was just a bit too high and I missed it. So I had to kind of like stop, put the brakes on, come back again, grab it. So I was drinking, which was fine, but then everyone else was already on their way through. So I'd gone in joint first and like came out, tumbled underneath people, black eyes, all sorts of stuff, like in 12th place. And that was like the first time in my career of the 10K, apart from that very first one, that I'd spent any time in the pack. And I was like, oh my goodness, you are so stupid, Keri-anne. How have you found yourself in this situation? How is it? This is the biggest competition of your life. And you've never swam in the pack before. Why? And I was like, oh, this is ridiculous. And I very nearly stopped. I was like, I've definitely got a black eye. I can feel it coming in. It would have been on TV. I can just, call a day and go, oh, I'm really sorry, I pulled out. I mean, I've never pulled out a race before, so that was obviously never going to happen. But that was the going through my head at the time. And Hyde Park, so it was classed as a really small venue, because actually it is quite small from one side to the other. And there were 30,000 people watching, which is absolutely mental. Like in Hyde Park, around it, watching. And I was the only Brit. And that noise that they, when I came out and they're like, and from Great Britain, Keri-anne Payne, like, I will never forget that noise. It was deafening noise that I've never heard again, probably will never hear it again in the rest of my life. But it was amazing. And people had banners that go Keri-anne, and I could see their faces. We were that close. I could see people's faces going, go Keri-anne, go. And I was like, I can't stop now. So I put my head down for the next 2 laps and then just kind of made my way back up the pack. But just didn't quite have enough time, or probably enough energy just at the end to do that. So finishing 4th was heartbreaking at home Olympic Games, especially when I was the favourite for that competition. It really was. And I had about 2 minutes to kind of prepare myself for Claire Balding and the rest of the world's media. And I've never seen a media queue as long as that, ever. Managed to just about hold it together. And they were like, what happened? And I was like, honestly, I haven't had a chance to decompress. I'm not really sure, but I made a mistake. I can't really, that's it. I just made a mistake. I can't really do anything more about it now. And it was tough. And again, so one of the very last people, you do the TV first, and then you do the newspapers, and then you do the radio and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, on the radio at the time, so at that competition, Steve Parry was doing 5 Live. And I properly broke down when I saw him and he saw me. We're both, but it was, just again, it was that kind of like, it was like a big brother to me in that kind of scenario. So it was really tough, but it is what it is. Like, that's the beauty and the curse of the sport. I've been on both ends of it. I've been on the end where I just touched someone out for 3rd, and now I've been on the end where I just touched out for 3rd. So it was really tough, and it took a good chunk of time after that to kind of get used to it. And I honestly now that I'm retired and out of it, I actually think that that's probably one of my proudest performances, that one. And it's not because of the performance. The performance was fine, and actually I'm proud of myself for continuing on, because I could have stopped and I probably would have, told myself a story and been okay with that, but I didn't. I carried on. I literally did the best I could with what I had at the end of that swim. But actually, it really opened up my eyes to what we, and I say we, myself, Cassie, David Davies, Dan Fogg, what we had done for the projection of open water swimming in the UK. And there's 30,000 people there watching, and loads were watching on TV. And still to this day, so that 2012 was a really long time ago. But to the day, still to this day, I still get, when I meet some people that are doing open water swimming, I still get someone that will say, I was there watching you, and you really inspired me to take on open water swimming, or I watched you on TV and you really inspired me. And I was like, at the time I was like, but I came 4th, like, why? And they were like, well, it doesn't matter, like, you watching you do that swim really inspired me to take up open water swimming. And I think my mission after that, which I hadn't quite realized my mission before that, wasn't, if you think about athletes that win Olympic medals, most people can probably name a handful of people from different sports that have won medals, the really famous ones, but there's loads of people that have won multiple medals that you might not even remember the name of.
Of course.
And it just really opened my eyes, that to come 4th, to miss out, for me, it was such a heartbreaking moment. For a lot of people, actually, was really a positive injection into their life, and now they love it and they take up open water swimming and they do it, and it's their happy place, and it's really helped them through loads of really dark times. So for me, that event actually is probably one of my proudest moments because of everything that happened.
Well, I think it's interesting that you can reflect in that way now, because when you are a professional athlete, you know, I know you said that you sort of raced to kind of qualify your training that you'd done, sort of thing. But ultimately, you're kind of taught to get into that mindset, aren't you, of winning or of doing the best that you can possibly do in a race. So if you don't quite do as well as you would hoped for, or you made mistakes or something like that, it's just really hard not to kind of beat yourself up about it. But actually now on reflection, you can look back and see the other side of it. And I think that's fantastic. And obviously you went on to swim for another, what, 5-6 years after that still?
Another Olympics, yeah. So I
Yeah.
went to Rio as well.
Yeah.
So from Beijing to Rio, to London to Rio. So yeah, and I ended my career on a high in terms of I've done everything I possibly can do. I came 7th in Rio. And on again, the beauty and the curse of open water is that it really depends on the conditions on the day as to who does better. So for this particular occasion, so for the Olympics in Rio, it was really flat calm. It was like a swimming pool. So the younger, I was 28 at the time, so quite old in the grand scheme of swimming, at that high level of swimming anyway. So the young pool swimmers who'd come from the pool, which is what we did. So in 2008, we were the pool swimmers coming to open water. So Great Britain started that trend of getting people changing the way that racing was done, because we'd honed those racing skills in the pool. And, you know, the 3 of us that went to the Beijing Olympics all came back with a medal, myself with silver, Cassie with bronze, David Davies with a silver as well. So 3 of 3, we won 3 of 3 medals we could have won at that competition. So lots more pool swimmers then got into the open water from there. So the pool swimmers just had a great time because it was like a pancake, really flat. I mean, it was the Copacabana, one of the most famous beaches in the world.
Amazing.
It was really flat. But to the day a year before at the test event, it was 6-foot waves. It was 16 degrees. I was loving life. I'm way more of a rough swimmer than the flat calm. Certainly at the end of my career, because I wasn't quite as young as I used to be. I wasn't, you know, I didn't quite have the recovery that lots of the younger ones did. So for me, my honing skills was my experience. So I was really experienced at making tactical decisions at the right moment at the right time. But I definitely preferred it when it was wavier.
Sure.
The test event a year in advance, which I won. And it was like 6-foot waves, like battling through everything, but I was absolutely loving it. It was a great competition for me. So it just depends on the conditions, especially in the sea sort of environment. But anyway, I did everything I could. I could not have done a single thing more in that 4 years. I had an amazing 4 years in the lead up to Rio. So I ended my career happy because I couldn't have done any more than I did.
Yeah, it sounds fantastic. And you had a wonderful career. And you mentioned you still see people that say, you know, you inspired them to. I bet you inspired many of our master swimmers, because there are a lot who do open water swimming, and you know, I'm sure they'll love listening to this and love listening to all the things that you're saying. So thank you very much for that. I wanted to ask actually now more about the kind of training side of things. So how different is it training for a 10K to training for an 800, for example, in terms of the meters that you're putting in a week and all the sort of things that you're doing within it?
Yeah, for me, honestly, it didn't change that much. I think, again, my coach really understood that I needed how my body, and we understood how my body performed at its best. So, you know, although it sounds a lot when you say it, but for a distance swimmer, it really wasn't. So I would be pushing anywhere from 70 to 75K a week, every week, pretty much, which sounds a lot. I appreciate it can sound a lot to someone that's swimming 5 or 6 times a week, or someone that's a sprinter, but for a distance swimmer. So I know the guys at Loughborough, they were pushing 90 to 100.
Yeah.
My body couldn't handle that. I was not designed and built for that kind of stamina. I was that kind of mix in between. And again, I think this came from my youth. I did the 100 fly. So I had enough, you know, fast twitch in me, that part to be really important. And if we pushed it too hard into the distance side, I totally lost that. And that for me was one of my strengths, was being able to have the stamina to race a 10K and hit it at a really hard pace. You know, like our average time for a 10K, if we averaged it, was somewhere between a 1:10 and a 1:12, essentially for 2 hours nonstop solid. That doesn't mean it was all at that pace, but you know, the last 1,000 meters were pushing 63, 64 for that last 1,000 meters, which then turned into the last 1,500, which then turned into the last 2K, and it just kind of got near us. The last 5K really pushing, you know, under 1:10 as much as we could. So training was about that balance for me, was still keeping the spark of the the fibers I needed, like racing, the speed that I needed,
Yeah.
because that was really important. Because if you sit behind someone, 112 actually feels like 114, which is totally manageable if you're in the right place in the pack. But you needed to be able to have that kind of the ability to push on to that next level. So for me, training didn't change a huge amount from my 800 days. It's just that the sessions probably slightly adapted. So we used to do like, race pace sets where we'd do hundreds or 200s at a particular race pace. And actually my coach, this was Lars, that he was like, well, maybe that's not going to be that helpful, because you need to swim quite fast for short periods of time and then come back down, and then fast for short periods of time as you go around buoys or come into feeding stations. So we need to work on that part of it. So one of the sessions we did was it was like 4 100s it was 4 100s, the time was descending from there. So I had to basically try and hit like a 103. So the first set it was on like 120, second set was on 115, then 110, then 105. So I did like 4 sets of 4 100s.
Yeah.
With, I basically had to keep hitting the same time, but the rest would really change. That last set was absolutely brutal because I was getting 2 seconds rest and having to go straight into it.
Yeah.
But actually that felt like it was way more like what a race might feel like for me. Doing a 200 on, 3 minutes or something, trying to hit the 103 and getting 45 seconds rest. That just wasn't happening for us in the race. Another set I did when I moved. So I moved from, which we didn't talk about earlier, after London, I moved from, after London Olympics, I moved from Manchester up to Edinburgh, and I trained with a lady called Laurel Bailey at Warren de Bath, who is by far, I love Lars, I really do, but she was amazing. So I'd gone full circle from the first person that coached me was a female to the last person that coached me was female, and she's honestly amazing. If anyone is looking to become a coach, speak to Laurel Bailey, she's called. She's amazing. And we would also run this set, essentially we would do thousands, so it'd be like 8 or 9 thousands, and it would be the first 500 I had to try and hit the same pace. So we'd start at like 125, which felt so slow at the time. So I'm not sure I could do that now, to be honest. So slow at the time. So the first 500 hitting 125 per 100, then the second 500 was then hitting 120, and then the next one started at 120 down to 115. So by the time we got to the last one, it was 500 at like 105, and then trying to hit 500 at much quicker than that. So it really was like a brutal way of working through things, but it was way more like what the 10K was for me. So it wasn't, we had to think outside the box a little bit, because I couldn't do the long distance stuff that, the real distance meters that lots of the other distance swimmers were doing, like the European swimmers are doing, like honestly 100K weeks every week. I'd be broken if I did them. I couldn't handle that.
That's those kind of distances, I couldn't even imagine swimming that many meters a week. It's insane. And in a way, I'm kind of relieved that you said that not a lot of change for you, because there is only so many meters that one can do in a week, isn't there? So I was half expecting you to say kind of 200 whatever, but just in terms of drills and skills in training, so we would always be working on like really slow swimming or breathing patterns or high elbow or straight on, whatever it may be, whatever suits your stroke. Were you doing a lot of that sort of stuff in your training, especially rhythm? Because rhythm must have been really important for you, because we're talking about 2 hours worth of swimming here.
Yeah, yes, we did lots, but if I think back to it now, actually I think drills are not particularly helpful. Sorry, guys.
Do you think this is for open water, or do you think this is for all swimming?
Everyone.
Really?
I think drills are only helpful if you know what the point of them is. Whenever we were told to do drills, now again, so lots of people are going to hate me for saying this, but whenever we were said, drills your choice, I would do fingertip drag. And I'm going to ask you to put your hand up right now if your drill of choice is fingertip drag.
Probably.
But it's absolutely pointless. Sorry again. And I spent probably days of my life doing a pointless drill for absolutely no reason other than it was the easiest one to do, and I quite enjoyed it. But it added no benefit to my performance. I could swim well. If you are struggling to get your hand to track under your elbow whilst you're doing your front crawl, then maybe working on that drill, as long as the reason I'm doing this is to help me get from here to here, my hand underneath, do it. But if you can do it, you don't need to do that drill. There was probably only 3 or 4 drills that someone needs to do that will help aid their particular stroke, their particular performance. Doing mindless drills for the sake of doing it is genuinely pointless. I think it's far better to maybe stick some fins on, stick a snorkel on, and hone in on one part of your body and work on that part, what that feels like doing full stroke. I think so many people spend so much of their time working on a drill that you can't necessarily feel straight back into your stroke. And I think I've become quite passionate about that now, becoming a coach at the end of it. Like, God, if you told me this as a kid, I'd be like, no, I need to work on this bit specifically. Because a drag is really important. It wasn't. I did it because it was the easiest and the thing I didn't have to think about the most. But if we can get people to do full stroke and work on, and again, we are humans and not very good at doing many things, multiple things at one time. So if you're trying to get better at your catch, as an example, you have to focus on one particular part of the catch and probably one arm. You can't think about both arms at the same time because that process is so quick. So you should spend 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 50s just focusing on that catch part, working on that catch part on your right arm.
Yeah.
You get it and you feel it. You do it again, time and time and time again. Muscle memory that way is going to be helpful. And then you spend the same amount of time doing it on the other side, rather than trying to do this crazy drill on both sides and then try and add it into full stroke. And actually people go, well, I think it feels different. I'm not really too sure. I don't really understand. I'm not really too sure. So for me, I find that that's far better for people to hone in on one particular part, actually keep it full stroke. So that's what I call drills now, is actually where we just focus on one particular thing. But it's still full stroke. And at the end, take fins off, take snorkels off, and then do proper full stroke from there. Because you're taking out the breathing, so you don't have to worry about the breathing. You're taking out a bit of the propulsion, so you don't have to worry about moving yourself forward, while you can then really focus on that one particular skill that you're working on, whether it's rotation, head position, arms, underneath your body, whatever else is happening. Even recovery, as an example, if recovery is important, you need to work on it, definitely work on it, but you have to just break it down into one thing at a time.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really interesting take. I think for me, what I like about drills is that it helps me get through a session, especially if I'm training on my own. I think if I've got, I don't know, 3K set or something and it's split into lots of things, it kind of makes the session go faster because, you know, you always have to think of different things. So from a mental refreshing point of view, it's kind of quite good for me. But that's really
good. For me, that's also good because there's a reason why you know why you're doing the drill.
Yes.
If it's to help you through the session, great. But don't expect it to help you through something if it's mindless, if that makes sense.
Yeah, of course.
If there's a point to it and you know why you're doing it, that's far better than just doing it because someone told you to do it.
Exactly, yeah.
You don't know why, they don't know why. The other thing is ask your coaches why. Sorry, coaches, but it's really important. If you ask your coach, why am I doing this drill? Why is this drill going to help me? And they don't have an answer for you, don't do it.
Interesting. How much training did you do in open water compared to the pool?
Not much. Or most of it. I'd say 95% of my training was in the pool. If we went on a competition, we'd do a bit of training in the open water, but hardly any. All of it was done in the pool, just because we had to, I was doing 70K a week. It was really hard to try and regulate that certainly in the UK, in the open water. So yeah, training camps, we'd try and go somewhere warm and I would try and do a session in the sea. But it was really difficult. Trying to do like 7K set in the sea is very different to doing 7K in the pool, for sure. Yeah,
no, sounds good. So from the point of view then, if people listen to this thinking, I really fancy giving open water a go, or I gave it a go years ago, but I want to, have another go, just kind of what are the fundamentals that people have to think about? I mean, we're talking about swimmers here that are used to training every week, they're fit, they've got good aerobic capacity, but if they want to go in there, what are the key differences that they've got to think about?
Yeah, so for me, a massive difference is the first time you go, just go and have a little bit of fun. Do not think of it as a session, because it is very different. The sessions that you run in the open water have to be a different mindset to the sessions you do in your pool. You can't say, well, I normally swim for 2 hours in the pool, so I'm going to go for a 2-hour swim. It doesn't always work that way, because the open water is, you don't have lane lines, you don't have a wall to rest on, so you are swimming the whole way through. So it will have more of an impact on you than you think it will do. And then you're navigating distance. So yes, you might go from here to that buoy is 400 meters, but depending on how good you are at swimming in a straight line, actually might be 450 meters because of the way that you're swimming. So it's really, I think you do have to change your mindset going to an open water session. It's not the same, and not that that's a bad thing. It's just that the mindset has to be different. So if you think, well, I can swim for 2 hours in the pool or an hour in the pool, I should be able to swim for an hour in the open water. Again, it's not always the case, because there are other multiple factors we need to consider. One of the things is the temperature. So if the water is 15 degrees or lower, which I can't imagine many people will be swimming in that sort of temperature, but our water doesn't, lake temperatures probably won't really increase that much to above 15 until July time. If you're going swimming and you're in your wetsuit and you feel like you can manage it, but the cold on our body has quite an impact. So does stress. So stress has an impact, sleep has an impact, all that kind of stuff. You can get away with that in the pool because you can have a little bit of a rest, and the pool is, generally 30 degrees or 28 to 30 degrees in a swimming pool. If it's 16 degrees, that's a massive difference between those two temperatures, and you're stressed at home or work or whatever, you haven't eaten very well, you haven't slept very well. Those three things, they make you feel the cold quicker. So your body becomes more susceptible to the cold. And when we become susceptible to the cold, we get tired quicker. So again, you might feel, I'm just really tired, or I can't bother doing this today, or, I'm really struggled. I'm really annoyed with myself because I only swam for 20 minutes instead of the 45 minutes I was supposed to. That's totally fine. Like, the Mother Nature will always win, always. So you got to kind of think of it like that. It can't be the same as your pool environment that is very structured, very stable, very safe, very, very consistent. The open water is not consistent. That's not to say it's not fun, because it is different every time you go, and that's personally why I love it so much, because every time I go to the lake, it's different temperature, different weather, different things, different people. I really love that, and I really champion and enjoy the differences of that, because it really helps your mind a lot more. You're in nature, you're outside, you're breathing slightly differently, you can change your mindset a little bit. But it is different. It's not as structured as a pool environment. It's just different. So going in with that mindset is going to be way more beneficial for someone than going, well, I'm just going to adjust that pool session I should have done for the open water. It's got to, you've got to think about it slightly differently.
No, that's really interesting. And I've always thought of the idea when I'm in the pool of like trying to be at one with the water, but actually being at one with the open water is very much a thing, isn't it? In terms of locations for swimmers, if they're looking to go in open water, would you, if it's their first time, would you recommend the sea or a lake? Like, what do you think is probably an easier way in?
Yeah, I think finding a venue is going to be the best thing for you. So even if it's a bit of a drive away, find a venue that has lifeguards. It's just going to add an extra layer of confidence for you to know that there are lifeguards there and people can watch over you. They've decided already on all the safety that needs to be considered. They've decided the best place to enter, to exit, where the lifeguards are going to be. They know the temperature of the water, they know the quality of the water. All these things are things we need to factor in and take into consideration is figuring out all these different bits and pieces. A venue will have all that stuff done and dusted. So if it's your first time, let's try and make the experience as good as it possibly can be. So find a venue that you can go, again, even if it's a bit of a travel away, go and do that. If you're going to go into the sea for the first time, do not expect to do any training on your first swim. Just go and be a kid. Go and enjoy it. Go in the water, see what it feels like, float, see what the water does, taste the water as well. Like, don't drink it, but taste it, because the sauce is obviously very different to a pool if you've never been in the open water before. Just experience what it feels like. Go underwater, see what it feels like to be in the waves. Is the water moving you one way or the other? Just experience it. And then if you've enjoyed it, then go back next time and maybe think about doing some swimming. If you are going to go into the sea, make sure that you go with people as well. Make sure you have visibility, so a tow float with you, brightly coloured swimming hats. If you're going to wear wetsuits as well, that's totally fine, not a problem. But just make sure your hat is really bright so people can see you as well as you go through. Have a check of weather conditions. Again, those are something that's really, really important, especially in a sea environment. So there is an app that I think everyone that's thinking about doing open water swimming should download. It's called Wild Open Water. And it's a swimming spot finder, which is amazing. So you can look in your local area to see if there's swimming spots, but also some of them are just like wild swimming spots. So there might just be a river, but they'll usually have like the best entry point is here and here. Parking is here. So it's giving you all the information you'd need. But I'd still say if it's your first time, go and find a regulated venue, which you'll also find on the app as well. There's also a forecast, a weather forecast, so you can check that. There's a tide forecast, temperature of the water, the sea. So there's loads of information to help you get prepared for your swim. And I've joined forces with them because I've helped to create like a mini risk assessment before you get in the water called Safe Outdoor Swimming. So I'd highly recommend doing that just to kind of key yourself up on all the knowledge you need about open water swimming. And so I'd highly recommend having a look at that app, because it's going to give you loads of locations you can swim around the country. There's like maybe 600 spots now on there, and you can also find coaches as well. So If you want to come to Shepperton to do a session with me, I'm on there, and that's where I run lots of my open water sessions, is in Shepperton, which is South London. There's loads of other coaches around the country as well.
Oh, that sounds really good, and thanks for sharing those tips as well. That's really helpful for us. So you mentioned earlier that you never really fell in love with the 10K, but you fell in love with everything else around it. Is that what kind of went on to you kind of setting up the two companies that you've set up? So Straight Line Swimming and Triscape. Do you want to talk to us a bit about those?
Yeah, so Triscape for me is it's my coaching business. So if I'm coaching anybody myself, whether that's one-to-one sessions, masterclasses, group sessions, or retreats. So we run retreats around, used to be around the world, but we're sticking to the UK since COVID for the time being. Although I am heading out to Europe this year, which I'm very excited about. That's me coaching, and I really love coaching. I love helping people, particularly beginners. They're my absolute favorite. I can coach triathletes, and I really enjoy that, and I can coach lots of masters. I really enjoy that transition. So for me, one of the groups of swimmers that I've identified are first timers, whether that's first time swimmers or first time into open water. I love first timers because my approach is very much about building confidence in my swimmers. So it's not about like forcing you in. It's not about making you do a 10K, because I'm not interested in you guys doing that. I just want you in the open water to experience it. So it's very much a confidence building process, is the process that I run people through. And also a swimming methodology that we have created through the hours of coaching and people we've coached throughout the years, which is different to how lots of people were taught how to swim, but I think we all need a shake up. Swimming definitely needs a shake up. Gone are the days of swimming with an S in your stroke,
yes,
and all that kind of stuff. And
being
still, exactly, rotation is key, and there's loads of things. So the methodology I use is has been really helpful for the 3,000 people I've coached over the last sort of 5 years. They've really enjoyed it and loved that kind of process. So for me, it's about starting in the pool, helping someone become more confident with their technique, and then I'd love to take them out into the open water specifically. So that's where the retreats, where people are on holiday, they feel more relaxed to try out different things, and so that's kind of where that one came from. And then Straight Line Swimming is I was approached by the Swimming Teachers Association, the STA, in 2018. They were just about to review their open water coaching qualification, and they asked they originally asked if I'd be the face of it, and I was like, no, I do not want to just be the face of it. I'm only going to put my face to it if I think it's really good. So let me see what you've got. And basically, it needed a major shakeup, to be honest, because open water swimming now is about so much more than just male triathletes, it was very male triathlete heavy, the previous qualification. It is about so much more. Even now it's revolutionized again, so much more again, which is amazing. Like, I really love how much open water swimming can offer to people, and how different it is. Wild swimming, open water swimming, cold water swimming, racing the channel, swimming the channel, doing it as a relay, doing long distance swims, wild swimming, finding waterfalls. Like, I mean, it's endless, the places that you can go with open water swimming or wild swimming or outdoor swimming, whatever it is you want to call it. So I joined forces with them and said, well, I'm only going to get stuck in if you're happy for me to add to it, to change it, to adjust it. And that's exactly what we did. So that launched in March 2018. And since then, I became a tutor of that qualification. And since then, I've qualified just under 500 coaches since then to become open water coaches. So if you are looking for an open water coach, we have a coach finder on our website, as well as on the Wild app as well. But if you head to Straight Line Swimming and look at the coach finder, you'll be able to hopefully find a coach in your area that can help you if you're looking to get coach sessions into the open water.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. And it sounds like you've had a really, really fun sort of post-competitive career retirement, actually. Is there anything else that you would like to achieve in your career in terms of anything to do with open water swim? Is there anything you've got your eye on?
No. No, I mean, I'm really enjoying the cold side of it now. I know I said earlier I'm a warm weather swimmer, and I'm a warm weather swimmer, but I'm really enjoying the cold dipping, and it's like a very different distinction between the two. Dipping is one thing for 2 minutes in the cold, and really like achieving and understanding the benefits of the cold and how amazing they can be. A lot of people are like, oh, cold, oh no, because they think you have to swim. You don't. You go in for 2 minutes. All the benefits that you get from that cold water therapy happen within those first 2 minutes. So you don't have to stay in longer. If you thought about it like training a different type of muscle in your body, essentially, is how you think about it. So I'm loving that. But I have no desires to do anything swimming related if I'm
No,
completely honest.
fair enough.
Need a bit of a break from that black line, from smelling like chlorine. I mean, I'm 5 years into that break now, and I'm still not quite ready yet, but we'll see how we get on. But yeah, loving the cold. If I lived anywhere near the sea, I'd be in the sea every day for sure. I really love the ocean and the sea. That's like my absolute happy place. But yeah, no, I mean, I have a daughter, she's 4 years old, so she keeps me really busy. A dog who's finally sleeping as well, who likes to keep me busy. So I do lots more walking, and yeah, I'm more into like the land-based stuff now. I just learned how to surf as well, which is quite fun. Say that
Very
that's
cool.
land-based, but it's on top of water-based.
Yeah.
So yeah, learning new things is what I'm excited about, because I never got to do lots of that stuff while I was swimming.
Well, that sounds fantastic. And if you're not following Keri-anne on Instagram, do that, and then you can find the Triscape and straight line swimming links. If not, do Google them and you can find them there. Thank you very much for your time today. I really enjoyed that chat. Could carry on speaking to you forever, but we've both got day jobs, I'm afraid. So we're going to have to leave it there. But thank you very much. It
No
really
worries.
was a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.